Good evening. You're listening to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you as usual from the Pinehurst Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I am in the Extreme Studios, and also from the Central Florida area, I have the young 20-something Professor Pixel. Tonight, Extreme TV, we're launching yet another Season 1 review of a particular TV show. And this time, Pixel, we're going back into the vaults of the early 1970s. We are tackling Columbo Season 1. And of course, the show being over 50 plus years old, I think a lot of people that are your generation, the mid-20s, don't even know who Columbo is. They might know some references, I think, in pop culture too, but that's pretty much by large and gone. And I will start off by saying this. We are not doing the made-for-TV movie that this debuted on as a pilot, which is typically what happened in the 60s and 70s going into the 80s before you would actually launch a TV show, where they'd make a movie and then do it. Millennium being the last particular awesome one in the late 90s. But the Columbo was somebody, Pixel, that I always thought of as just kind of the goof with the trench coat going, oh, there's just one more thing. But the thing is when they started making some made-for-TV movies and whatever the last couple seasons were sparingly in the late 80s or the 90s, I did watch a few of those. I remember my parents being of the older generation, of course, me being an 80s kid, used to talk about, no, it really is a really, really good show. And so to me, I always thought there's a little bit of a goofy element to Columbo. And I know we're getting ready to dive into this first episode here because it's anything but that was my initial take on what the whole Columbo character is. And again, this is pretty rare. We've done The Prisoner, which is an old show. We've done Mission Impossible, the original TV show, Season 1. So we're staying kind of old here on Extreme TV, 1971. Did you even know who Columbo was when we decided to do this? I mean, what was your initial take on him before we get into the episode?
Yeah, no, I heard of Columbo. I've been meaning to watch the show before, and so when we decided that we were going to go ahead and pick a new show for us to dig through, I was definitely intrigued to go ahead and start doing Columbo. I knew who Peter Falk was, and you know what you said. I absolutely understand that because that is kind of the point of him. He's supposed to appear like, oh, he's more of a bumbling kind of oaf, but that's his appearance. He's actually quite a thinker.
Right. And I think the interesting thing about Columbo is on Peacock, there's a show with the young woman in it. The name escapes me off the top of my head. And it's basically female Columbo. She's got like this eidetic memory or whatever the hell you call it, photographic, where she can subconsciously, instinctively tell when somebody's lying, and she uses that to her advantage. And they show her off in Vegas, and there's a few episodes, and the setup is similar in that there's a murder and a setup at the beginning of the episode before you would see the Columbo character. And then, of course, we know what happened and how it happened. So what we're watching is to see how this detective makes it unfold. So that's different. And I don't know with Columbo if that's the first show that did something that way, because we always mention that the Hitchcock experience that people like to talk about, where you show a bomb getting ready to go off and with an average person, and he's put in an extraordinary circumstance, and how is he going to deal with it? Let's watch. And that builds the tension because you see it. I don't know if that's always true, right? But definitely I think Columbo is noted for it, certainly before the Peacock show. And the last thing I'll sit there and say is, holy shit, this is a really good episode. I mean, it's a first watch for both of us and all that too. So yeah. I'll let you kind of, as a first watch and being the younger guy, kind of start us off in the episode as we get going. Set us up, please.
I mean, for this one, going in, I had always heard that it's a little different for a mystery because this isn't going to be a whodunit. You know who did it. So when this one started, you have a pair of authors, one being the writer, the other being a name that takes credit. And you go ahead, zoom in, he's tip-tapping away. He's writing the final book in their series. After that, he's going to go write his own thing. He's going to go do his own work. It's going to be great. But obviously, the partner isn't happy with that. Their Mrs. Melville, that's her name, is going to die, and that means his career is at an end because he's not writing anything. So he decides, okay, it's in good. we're in good spirits. Why don't you come to my lake house for just the weekend? Relax, enjoy the night, one last hurrah. And he carefully plans out, and you're seeing as he's doing these little steps. Oh, there's no one in the car. He says on his way up, stopping at the little farmer's market, little what's the term?
Oh, where he meets the lady?
Yeah, there is
It's a little convenience store.
General store.
He's taking him to the mountains a few hours away from downtown LA to celebrate and all that. And he's actually trying to apologize because we find out that they both have a unique way of this relationship. The book's being published, but he does all the publicity while the guy does all the writing. So they kind of handle unique parts to it, but the guy wants to be out on his own.
Yeah.
So we know something's afoot.
And with every step, like we said at the general store, he claims that he is alone. We saw him rummaging not through the office, but planting things when his partner was on the phone or looking away. And then finally, he goes ahead, gets him to his little lake house, and he goes ahead and one last thing, he has the author call his wife, claim to be at the office. Call her direct. You don't want to go through an operator. Otherwise, she won't believe you. Just call the direct line and let her know. Oh, well, I'll be home late, honey. Yeah. I really want to just power through this. And then while he's on the phone, pulls out the gun and shoots it. And then we get to see him dispose of the body. Or not dispose of, hide the body to reveal later.
Yeah, this is an interesting setup to me because a couple things I want to, as an 80s teenager, point out to the audience too, because we have people across the world and all that too. Again, this show's over 50 years old, right? You've got this incredible shot of this guy writing in his office, Hollywood Hills, whatever it is, overlooking downtown LA. And in the 70s, there's a hell of a lot more smog than there is now. So you can just see outside it. And it's a really good print if you have Peacock right now where it's currently playing. Perhaps you can get it through Amazon, depending on where you're at. We're in the United States, of course. And as a teenager in the 80s, you heard a lot about how bad the 70s were with pollution and everything else there too. So it's incredible because this is shot like a movie, and it's shot by a young director named Steven Spielberg, believe it or not. So a lot of times these TV movies, like to say, they were considered a little bit higher quality, not just in terms of the directing or writing, but all of it, because it was treated very seriously. And of course, this first season only has, I think, 7 episodes in it, not counting the TV movie. So this is a fill-in, and then, of course, if it does well with ratings at the time, the Nielsen ratings, they would renew it. But the thing I want to point out to all the pop culture freaks out there is I am completely transported back to stuff that I remember as a very, very young child, with the way people dressed, pinky rings for guys, ascots, you name it. Because the whole thing that makes this episode work to me, even though there's some great shots when they go up in the mountains, it's Bear Lake, California, where it's filmed. The person playing, and his name may mean nothing to you. I certainly knew the name and had to see what his relationships were, but Jack Cassidy is the name who's playing the Ken Franklin, one of the two guys, the playboy of it. You've got the nerd and you've got the playboy. The nerd's married. He's trying to keep a clean life. The playboy's out there spending a shit ton of money, drinking. He's got tons of women and all that. He's got the pencil-thin mustache. The guy's a player. He's the man, right? This guy, Jack Cassidy, is the father of the Cassidy clan from the Partridge family. And of course, that means father of Sean Cassidy, who was Parker Stevenson's roommate, I should say, detective partner in the Hardy Boys from the 70s. And I'm like, holy crap, what a small world. But here's the whole point. Despite geeking out over all that stuff, this guy owns it. I mean, Columbo is a very strong personality. He did not come across as a goof in this episode, but he is chewing up the scenery unlike almost any actor I could ever say. It's just phenomenal how good Jack Cassidy is in here. He could sing, he could dance, he could do a whole bunch of things. I was blown away by the talent that this guy had, because at first I thought he was overacting, but then as we get going here, you're like, oh my God, this is one of those situations where you say, how strong the bad guy is really is how far the episode can go. And here, You're right. He takes the guy there. He's got this plot and scheming going up. He meets a lady who's obviously fawning over him, and he signs a book for her. And then when he gets him there, he has her call. He's like, "It's obvious you haven't had any affairs before. This is how it works. This is pre-cell phones." So he knows that you would have, say, a party line, or you call long distance and everything too. And we'll talk about Columbo here in a moment when he makes his entrance and gets going on the case. I just thought this guy's performance was phenomenal from beginning to end, and has an incredible ending, which I have a difficult time saying. But this whole setup, I'm like, okay, I like how they start off in the city. I like how we got the murder, and they don't actually show you the violence; they just intimate it, right?
Yep.
That's a good thing too. There's no need for it. Just take the clothes off, let them drop to the floor, and then fade to black if people are going to be making love. Same thing with the violence; you don't have to see it. But I thought Jack Cassidy as Ken Franklin here just tore it up here too. But of course, now that he's made the call and all that, this is when we start to see Columbo. So from here, getting close to the end of the first act, when we start to meet Columbo and all that, what did you think about what was happening?
I mean, like I said, for most mysteries, you're going through and you're trying to solve it. There's nothing to solve here. We spent a good 20 minutes, half an hour setting up all of this, and it's still so intriguing. And that's just perfect for when Columbo finally does arrive on the scene at the writer's office to go ahead and inspect it. There's no body. They heard a gunshot over the phone, and it appears like maybe his place has been broken into, because I forgot to mention that he had to go back up. He forgot his lighter.
I love lighters like that, absolutely too. Yeah, and so you could tell by the way he set it down, then went to pick it up later. It was all intentional. So you're like, okay, well, what's he planning, right? This is a cool setup because he ransacks the office and all that too, and then this is where Columbo's at. So he meets the wife. I'll just throw this as an observation. I don't know that it's relevant, or if it is, maybe I just don't recall it. But I thought the writing was so tight in here. I was going, okay, it's the early 70s, maybe it's the late 60s or the 70s. We talk about the feminist movement and certain liberal things making their way into mainstream media. There's definitely a thing about playboys being epitomized by, Ken Franklin character here. But as a housewife here, staying home, a good doting wife for, to her husband, she seemed like an okay character, but it seemed like I know she was grief stricken, but I couldn't tell if it was the grief or if she was under the influence of something. Because they didn't have any problems or anything. It was kind of odd the way the actress was performing. Or is that me?
She played it kind of numb, like she was numb. Because that's going ahead and talking about that. You're right. Columbo doesn't even come in at first because you have the wife. She's upset. She's at the office. All the police are going around. They're asking questions. She is just, it's too much. And so Columbo comes in after she takes a moment, and he's like, "Here, let me take you home. We'll talk. Make an omelet." And when they chat in her house, you're right. She does feel like she's kind of numb still from that moment on. But I did like that was our introduction of Columbo. Somebody who's very caring, somebody who's trying to go ahead and get a sense of the people involved. People will never see again, but that doesn't really matter because for this, it's all we need. And that's when Columbo learns that he is actually the partner doesn't write.
Yep.
Written in years. And it's later that same night after, what's his name? Franklin comes back in. He's like, "Oh, I drove all the way here." And Columbo asks, "You drove all the way? Why didn't you take a flight?" But he just brushes it off. I wasn't thinking.
All right.
Planned out everything so far, but he decided to take the car. And after a slight farewell to Columbo, he plants the body at his own place, which allows Columbo to come back in and Franklin to speak to him. and he's trying to push him in the right direction, because, oh, look at that. There's a list of names in the office. What could this be? Oh, it's my old writing partner. He was starting to investigate crime families. That's the secret. That's the kicker. But Columbo is entertaining him. He's listening, and he's like, okay, yeah, no, this definitely helps. It's funny how people grieve, though, how people react, because that body that he found in his lawn calls the police straight away. But he took the time to open his mail.
Yeah. This is kind of interesting because if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss stuff. And the one observation about Columbo I saw early on was that, one, he's got a trench coat, which is always great for detectives. It's just classic, going back to Humphrey Bogart. It's a situation where you see him with the wife, and you're right, she's numb, I guess, is a great way to describe how she's feeling, because 99% of the time it's never numb, but she does it really well. So that's why I was like, wow, she's really detached. I was like, is there something more to it or not? It was that intense. I was like, okay. And I thought it provided a nice way of you kind of not being distracted. Let's say if she was hysterical. So I don't know if this is intentional, what I'm about to say, but I found Columbo to be what we would call a good listener. He makes a comment about something, small talk. Whatever the person says or doesn't say, he remarks on. He only asks one question. But what he does is he shuts up and he lets the person talk. So in this case, he comforts her, knowing that if he badges her, he's not going to get anything, typically. And a lot of TV shows today, that they always have the good cop, bad cop scene, and all these different procedurals are out there. They're acting like they're badasses, and they can get in there and they can threaten and intimidate and be real militant with whoever's for it. And you really don't have to say anything. And so there's a part of me going, okay, Ken Franklin technically doesn't have to say anything. And I know he's trying to steer Columbo that way. And we don't know how good Columbo is, except by, pop culture reputation, right? So I found it very interesting that he's cooking for her. And the thing about the scene that I like, and I noticed in several scenes in here, and we'll see if this continues in other episodes, is while there's conversation going on, it's not I'm standing there across from you and we're talking. There's a physical act going on. This is like an old stage play acting kind of thing, where you don't just sit there and stand and look at the audience and give a monologue. What you do is you're busy doing something while you're having a conversation. So he's cooking and talking and listening. It's much more natural and human that this goes on, and it doesn't always happen in movies. You and I here are on the Extreme Movie Show with TV shows and movies. We've talked about the data dump scenes where people are walking down a hallway and saying something just to fill you in, and we're like, oh, that's lazy writing or whatever. It's just too easy. Here, I like the fact that it makes sense. Hey, let me take you home. I know it's late. She's like, well, I can make the coffee if you're making the eggs or whatever. But you're right. He's the kind of guy that I think, at least in this episode, again, we'll see if it continues, it's the classic case of you can catch more flies with honey than whatever else, right? Because he's not being sweet talking, but he's being very deferential with no ego. He's like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, yes, sir, no, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't realize that, sir. And he's not being an ass about it. He's just whatever. He's listening. He's taking all the shit in. So I just thought that was pretty awesome watching this go on, because we come to find out that Ken Franklin being a player, to your point, he's just, when he goes to visit him, he's like, oh, you've got your mail here, sir. Well, yes, it is. Well, why? To your point, why would you check it if there's a body there? Oh, I wasn't thinking. Well, that's technically true too. And I keep thinking, one thing to get Columbo on it, but he's like a bloodhound. Once he gets a thought, it appears that it's something he's going to dive into. It turns out that the lady at the convenience store that he sees once in a blue moon, when he takes all his different women up to his love shack there, she's got the hots for him too and wants to party. Something interesting develops here as we go from the second to third act. So let me go ahead and kind of hand it over to you to fill in this part.
Yeah. So Franklin is out with some girl. They were at watching a play. They leave, and they're going to go out for a late dinner. But that's when the woman at the general store, she's wearing this red dress. Oh, Mr. Franklin, I think we should talk. I really think so. It's really important. And she basically gets him, they have dinner, and over that, she explains that she, while he was making a call, she saw that his writing partner was out at the cabin with him that day, waiting in the car. And that this information it's interesting, but she doesn't think anybody knows. Nobody knows about it, and it doesn't need to get out for the price of $15,000.
This is early 1970s, just getting off the gold standard money. This is a hell of a lot of money back then. It's probably, what, I'm going to guess 100, 200,000 now.
Yeah. And she says, just that, and then I'll be happy. And he says, you know what? I admire you. I'm going to accept your deal. And so he sets up another weekend at the cabin. He goes up, stops at her store, and he brings wine, 2 bottles. And Columbo's already out there when he's setting up.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I would just, take a look at the area, have some vacation time coming up, maybe bring the wife. And he makes a note of the 2 bottles of wine. And he's like, I can certainly drink 2 bottles of wine myself.
Yeah.
Because Franklin's getting a little annoyed now. But he puts his plan into action. And he goes with her. They drink and eat. He has the money in a suitcase there, and she looks at it. And he was trying to seduce her, but he realizes, okay, that's not going to work. And so, as she's looking at the money, daydreaming for a moment, he pulls out the gun. Or no, not the gun. Not a gun. He takes the other bottle, wraps around, and you forget that. And then he goes and dumps the body in the lake.
I thought this was pretty cool. I you know what was going to happen. I had no problem with her trying to get money out of him. They don't make her seem like an angry person. She's actually, I think, a widow, and the stores, they don't make a lot of money, and it's just, it makes sense. And so I'm not faulting anybody here. I'm not saying he's a good guy or a bad guy or her. It's just human stuff. Columbo's showing up. He gives enough rope to hang himself with, right? Saying, oh, I was here with the wife. You're thinking about blah, blah, blah. And he's basically doing the whole, well, you're really not rich, and these things are all booked up. So, you think, sir? He's just letting them talk, because to your point, he goes to the store and he finds the book where he'd autographed and given it to her, whatever, like that, love Jack or Ken or whatever, right? And it's just,
he claimed he didn't know the woman who died at all.
Yeah. So that's 3 different fibs, not lies by omissions, by exaggerations, whatever you want to call them to it. But I just thought it was great. And there is an insurance policy thing here, which I don't think really matters, even though Franklin's, spends a lot of money. He'd get a lot of money if his partner, Jim, died. But the thing is how do you blame him for his death? And so at this point, we're going, okay, Columbo pretty much knows. But
because he not only pulled out the money, the next day, he put it back into the bank account.
It's good old detective work, right? Tracking transactions, right? These things that get flagged on the computer, these days. Here you have to call it in, check, get it all in time. So there's this. What I liked about this episode was that you had these detective things that normally we would see or they would talk about would happen off screen while we can watch the human reactions into it. Because basically all this is going on. And there's some beautiful shots here up in Big Bear Lake, the way Spielberg shot it with the outside and the contrast. This is what I think of when I think of California. But the thing is, Franklin, who's trying to go move in and take over the office and all that too. There's a bunch of guards there. He's like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, hey, I got to move all this crap out. And Columbo's sitting there. And we're like, we don't know what's going on. And then he goes, well, I knew it was for you. And then he explains why. It's the Sherlock Holmes moment, right? was it Mrs. Melville was the name of the fictional detective? So it could be Miss Marple, if I remember, or Agatha Christie. I don't know, but it's all basically to tell the audience member or the reader, in this case of the book, how it really worked. And so Franklin's like, yeah, right. You can't prove anything like that. And here's the thing. All the stories in the comments about how his partner got ideas from it were just like, hey, I'm inspired. Let me write it down, back of a cocktail napkin, back of a matchbook, whatever like that. So we're here like, okay, how's this going to wrap up? We had found a little note that basically described exactly the way this killing would go down. And so Ken's sitting there listening to him, and he's realizing that his partner, it was in one of their books or whatever, because Columbo did borrow all the books and kind of read through them, but he wasn't reading them. He was looking to see if this murder was actually used before, and it was. And the thing about it too is you see Franklin there, and he's like, I'm going to kill you. He's not worked out. He's taking it, and he's like, ah, shit, you got me. And so they're basically going to arrest him. And he goes, you know something, Columbo? He's like, what's that, sir? He goes, I never had a good idea, but this one was actually mine, and it's the only one he ever used. I just thought that was such a beautiful way to end it, with a little bit of cynicism and like, okay, I give up. You got me. And that's pretty much it. And you ended. That was a great ending to me. What did you think?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think he actually used it in the books. It was an idea for a book.
Well,
actually, yeah. The fact that it existed as a little note described that way was what he needed, and that's what he had. Who would have thought that idiot would have written it down? And no, it's great. It's great. And the moment he knows, it's like, oh, okay, that's it. And you're right. All throughout this, Jack Cassidy has such a strong presence. Like, you enjoy watching him, even though he's scum of the earth, evil. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. But it's a fun that you can, like you said, these are very serious. This isn't a jokey comedy show. This is not a murder mystery, but basically a murder mystery.
This is like a good movie to me. I really liked it a lot. So
it is a great movie, yeah. And that's what it is. TV movie.
Yeah, a TV movie of the week that would be popular on some of the channels and all that too. So great way to start off season 1 of Columbo from 1971. I think it was in the falls when it actually came out. We'll talk more about some of the things that we saw in this episode when we review season 2. I think there's some potential ideas that we see here. We never know if it takes a couple episodes for them to get into it, or if it's pretty much solidified. It'll be interesting to talk about that. Overall, great episode. Loved a lot. Very beautiful looking. Jack Cassidy owns it. Columbo is very strong, not dopey. I was impressed. Any final thoughts?
Pretty much that. This was a very, very strong start to what looks like it's going to be a strong series.
All right, let's hope so as we get into the rest of season 1 here on Extreme TV. I'm your host, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, stay extreme. Have a good night now.
This was a Steven Spielberg production this one time.
Well, at least as a director. Not Dan Curtis.